Hello, everyone. My name's Kimberly Ayers, and I am excited to be here and a part of PHDwin Week 2025. I'll be presenting Type Wells in Action. Appalachian Basin Data meets A4E in PHDwin version 3. Before we get started, I wanted to give you a little bit more about myself and my team so that you know my perspective and that the conversation can be beneficial to you knowing where my expertise lies. I have a master's in petroleum from West Virginia University, and I'm also a certified mineral appraiser. I founded Ayers Petroleum Consulting in 2017, and we're located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My small team of production and reservoir engineers loves assisting small and mid-sized conventional and unconventional operators. We are specifically focused on the Appalachian Basin, which is comprised of Ohio, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia primarily. We do also assist clients in Kentucky, Tennessee, New York, Virginia, etc. Occasionally, we assist banks. We work with mineral owners frequently and mineral buyers, and we love being a part of the oil and gas industry. In this presentation, we're going to be demoing the Appalachian Basin Horizontal Well Database. This is a product that my team maintains and has subscribers to, but it basically is a compilation of state available data. Each of the three states we focus on have Marcellus, Utica, and Burkett shale plays in them. And all of the states have different reporting requirements and timing and difficult data to import into databases. So this product has been around since the beginning of the shale play, and we do a really good job at cleaning it up and making it usable to engineers in a format that you can pull directly into PHDwin version 3. We do this monthly. We also provide production and EUR forecast along with all of the regular header data. We keep all of the operators up to date when acquisitions are happening. And we do a lot of cleansing of the data so that it's usable for not only our team, but to our subscribers. I would encourage you all to sign up for a free monthly newsletter if you're interested in in the engineering or operations development type topics in the Appalachian Basin. It's free. It's at that link below. And we publish that monthly with some of the topics that I find interesting. And we just love serving everyone up here and learning what we can about the unconventional development. All right, for my presentation today, I'm hoping to take you through a full workflow of selecting your data from your database of information. In my case, I'm using the AppBasin database. In your case, it could be internal data. It could be another public data source. We're going to integrate that directly into the Blue River Analytics A4E Spotfire dashboard. That's going to help us with some different items. We're going to then push that into PHDwin version 3. We're going to do a full PDP workflow and a type well. Then we're going to push it back into Blue River Analytics A4E reporting dashboard that ties right into PHDwin to do some analysis on the work we did. Before we start, though, I really wanted to discuss my philosophy on type well development and what the goal of that should be. As I mentioned, I'm wanting to do a round trip evaluation here of PDPs and type wells. PDP, I'm sure all of you are more than well versed in the best practices of fitting curves and auto forecasting methods that are coming out and using PHDwin. I did want to focus on my philosophy to type well development because we're going to spend the first half really going over a well selection and then what we do with that and how we come up with our parameters. So in my mind, there's three main goals of a type well if you're sharing them outside of the engineering team. You want them to be representative, you want them to be reliable, and you want them to be refined. Now, what I specifically mean by that is representative wells, or what we call analogy wells, analogy set. You'll hear me using those words. They need to be representative of what you're trying to produce. Now, I could be doing a type well that represents what happened in the past to try and understand if wells of the same vintage underperformed what would have been expected a long time ago. Or in most cases, I'm looking for a type well to represent future development in a field that's upcoming. So in that case, I need to make sure that the geology is consistent if I know that, or that the completion methods are consistent. Maybe I want to consider a specific operator, maybe I don't. And then typically we can do that by vintaging in my particular area. So we're going to talk about each of those and how they impact the type well and the analogy set and where that goes. I know in some basins, geology is very consistent. In our basin, some areas, the resource is a true resource play. In other areas, it's maybe more of a structure play. So I try to keep the geology in mind. And then completion technology, in our case, drastically changed in 2016. So we're pretty easily able to filter out old completions versus new completions to look for wells that are representative of new development. When I say reliable, what I mean by that is we need to have a relatively tight confidence range. It doesn't need to be as tight as your PDPs per PRMS rules, as PWE monographs, but it needs to be tight. And we want it to be repeatable and functional across a lot of tools. And what I mean by that is we need to be able to share our analogy set with others. We need to be able to push that analogy set easily in and out of software. And we need to be able to document why we selected the wells that we selected. I'm sure a lot of you have been a part of A&D processes and type wells over an undeveloped area that is being valued in the deal. And a lot of the discussion comes down to which wells, which PDP wells are in or out of the analogy set. So that is something we're going to focus on here as well. And then because of the tools we have at our fingertips, we're going to be able to repeat that across all of the tools and then represent that to the stakeholders. Now, what I mean by refined is that it needs to be, our type walls need to be easy to explain, quick to produce, and visually understandable. Thankfully, Spotfire has done a lot of that for us. And now that we're integrating these tools from Blue River Analytics and PHDwin and looping this whole workflow together, it becomes really quick to produce a type well. I'm sure a lot of you who've been in the industry for a while remember getting days to come up with a type well. Now we're expected to do them in hours, and they still need to have all of the prior attributes that I mentioned. So integrating these tools have been really helpful to me and my team so that we can not only get a reliable representative type well very quickly, but we also now have these really great looking visualizations and statistically solid visualizations of the data that we can share with the management team to give them a sense of how confident we are. All right, that's enough of my theory. I would love to chat with any of you about your type well philosophy, and I'm sure we have some disagreements. I'm sure we agree on a lot of things, but this is where I'm coming from as I select my wells. All right, so here's my basic workflow we're going to be walking through. First, we're going to do some data exploration and selection of the analogy set. To me, this is very important. There's basically two methods here in which you can approach a type well. You can approach it from, here is a general geographic area. I'm going to push all of that through. Fitting, auto fitting, and then I'm going to normalize the data, and then I'm going to have my curve parameters. That normalization step becomes very important in that case. In my method that I prefer, also because of my familiarity with the area, I like to really sort down and filter to wells I believe are analogous before auto fitting and then normalizing to a specific parameter and then coming up with a type curve. So I like to start with a smaller set of analogy wells and move from there rather than larger, normalize, then have your parameters. So we're going to do first, that will be in the APC AppBasin database. And then our second step is going to be pushing that list of wells into the Blue River Analytics A4E tool. In that tool, I'll show you how to auto-fit DCA. We're going to do some normalization and look at the resulting parameter distributions and get a sense of what our type curve will look like. The third step is going to be pushing that well set into PHDwin. We're going to do a PDP analysis on those wells and then have a type curve, a representative type curve of those wells. And then after that, we're going to push the resulting economics and well evaluations into A4E's PHDwin reports dashboard and review our data and see where we come out with things. To set the stage, I want to put a couple points out here that will orient our example evaluation. So I'm going to assume that our client, or maybe I'm an engineer at a non-operating partner who is an owner with several E&P companies. The location is in Wetzel County, West Virginia, and the reason we're doing this is both Antero and EQT have proposed new development. We need to decide if we want to participate in these wells because we're a working interest owner. And we're going to focus just on this county. We're going to assume that we only own interest in wells in this county for these two operators. And we've been asked to provide a current value of both the PDPs that we're partners in and a representative type well for the area. Thankfully, we don't have a lot of timing assumptions here, and we're just going to assume everything is January 1st, 2026. All right, so I've set the stage, and now we're going to jump right into the next step. All right, and here we are in the Appalachian Basin Database. This is our Spotfire dashboard that myself and my team use to look through the database, manage the database, and then also select our analogy wells for type well development. Starting here on this main page, I did want to show you guys where most of the development is in the Appalachian Basin. We have northeastern Pennsylvania, southwestern Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and then development in Ohio. The colors are by the current production status. So the red are producing wells and the other colors are in various stages of development. First off, based on the defined problem, we're going to filter down to producing wells because we're going to be basing this off of producing wells from the two operators we are partners with. So I'm going to filter us down to just producing wells. I'm going to filter us down to the state of West Virginia. And I also know that the majority of wells in Wetzel County are Marcellus wells, and that's what the new development will be. So I'm filtering to Marcellus. That leaves me down here in West Virginia with that development. And then I'm going to go over here and filter to Wetzel County specifically. And there we are. So now I have a variety of operators here that are involved. I know from the proposed development that there's going to be new wells drilled in this blank area here in the northwestern corner. And you can see here that the greenish wells are EQT wells and the yellow wells are Antero wells. And up here to the north, we have expand energy wells. So I'm probably going to be wanting to use all of those in development of my type well. Also to the south, we have Tribune wells. However, I know that their land position is right here very close, and their completions design is significantly different than what I would expect from a EQT or Antero well. So typically when I first start my type well development, I like to choose a radius so that I know that theoretically the geology within a certain amount of miles will be similar. I also know from experience that this county's geology is relatively flat and relatively consistent. So we don't have any large controlling faults or variations in productivity according to the geologist. So what I'm going to do is, I know my development is here in this area. So I'm just going to choose a spot in the middle of that, and I'm going to go out to an 8-mile radius here. And this does grab in some Expand Energy, EQT, Antero, and Tribune wells. And I'm going to filter down to that set. And I'm going to continue walking you through the dashboard and removing wells as we go that I find that are not analogous. First off, we're going to look at our reservoir analysis. So I do know that generally the Marcellus play is less mature going to the northwest. So in my well set, I might have grabbed one well that's still considered dry gas. The majority of these are wet gas and condensate wells. And then I have a couple unassigned. So that tells me that we might have grabbed a few wells that are very new with very limited production. All right, so now I'm just going to filter down to the wet gas and condensate wells and see what that does here to our permitting history. I also am going to observe that the majority of permits, at least for this county, were done prior to 2016. And as I mentioned, starting out, that mostly completions technology is relatively similar since 2016. So the majority of the wells I'm going to be working with are going to be in this set. I'm not going to filter at this point because it is possible that wells that were permitted back a few years had extended permits and then were completed with modern completions. All right, let's take a look here at the operators that are involved. So again, I'm down to these few operators. I did mention that I want to exclude Tribune in this case. So we're going to do that here. I'm going to select Antero and expand and EQT. Let that load for a moment. Now on the operator metrics page, we can see that the majority of the wells are EQT, and we do have some Antero wells in here, so that's important. I would like to point out that the majority of these EQT wells came through an acquisition or a merger. And the same with Expand, but that was because this is a combination of the Chesapeake and the SWIN companies that are now Expand. So they always show up acquisitions in our database. And then Anteros are all original wells. Now we're going to look at our drilling metrics page. This is where we're going to start filtering down to the years in which we're interested in the data. So as I mentioned, 2016 is a really good cutoff, so I'm going to go ahead and start selecting wells past 2017 and also wells with an empty date, because sometimes we don't have drilling records, but we do have completion records in these states. So I'm filtered down to this set, and now I'm down to 83 wells. I also would like to point out this footage per year. You can see early on, 2017, we're less than 15,000 feet, and now we're regularly above 20,000 feet. And we have a wide variety of drilling companies in this basin, just out of curiosity there. Now we're going to move over to our completion metrics. Looks like some of those empty wells did have completions, but they were back in a few years ago. So we're definitely going to filter down there. I also am going to expand this so we can look at our number of stages versus average stage length. That's a really good indicator up here of if the frac was of modern design or not. So we went in this basin generally from very long stages, as you can see here, 300 plus, and then we overcorrected generally down to closer to 150. And then since about 2018, 2019, most operators are using 200-foot stages basically across the board. So you can see the effect of longer lateral length here, where we reach that 200-foot stage length, and then our number of stages is increasing because of lateral length. So at this point, I'm going to further be filtering down from my analogy set, and I'm going to select wells with 200-foot stage lengths or more. So that gets me to this well set here. And now you can see that our marked well set is down to 64 wells. All right, and we have a whole bunch of different metrics here we can look at. These become important when we are normalizing. So I do see that Antera's got a cluster here, total sand. Their lateral lengths are probably similar. EQT's got a cluster here. So we are going to continue on here with our completions design stage. And as you can see, the wells left on the map are the ones left in my filter. I've got quite a few expand energy wells up here still. Got a lot of Antera wells. Antera seems to do a pretty large ratio of their sand versus water. Our stage length over here, as I said, we filtered to stuff over 200 feet. And down here, most of our stages have more than 2,000 pounds per foot of sand, which is pretty normal. And we consider that as a modern frac. Sometimes we're over 2,500 to 3,000, but this seems to be a pretty good well set. Again, we're at 64 wells. Going to quickly take a look at the production history. This is loading here. So it looks like my well set has been reduced down to wells since 2020. That's pretty common for up here once I start sorting. And these maps here are showing total gas and total oil produced to date. Now, I will note in West Virginia, oil production is whatever liquid volume that you are producing at the wellhead. These are actually natural gas liquids, condensate, etc. In West Virginia, all of that gets aggregated into an oil category. So that's what that's representing. And at this point, I'm feeling pretty confident that I've got a geographically distributed analogy set. Again, my development area is in between these two areas. I've got some EQT wells, some expand wells, and some Antera wells. So we're going to now push these over into the Blue River Analytics A4E dashboard and do some additional analysis. All right, and now we're jumping over into the Blue River Analytics A4E dashboard. The way I connect to my particular well set that I liked, again, remember, I like to filter to my well set based on completions, vintage, etc., before I start doing the production analysis. So the way that I do that is in the A4E dashboard, I drop in my API table list. Now, the fun thing about this dashboard is that later today in PHDwin Week, the Blue River Analytics guys are going to be going over exactly how this dashboard works. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time with this or showing you how I did what I did because they're going to cover that. But I'm just going to show you how I make some additional well selections. So here's my lead-in page. Again, I'm back to that same set of 64 wells, and I'm now going to be focusing on production rather than well construction. So I've got a couple nice heat maps here. I can see that my oil production first 12 months heat map here is changing. Our GOR is definitely changing to the east. And I think that's informative as we go here. And again, remember, we're looking for a well in the middle of these. So it does seem like we might have some pretty good averaging going on. Once I do that, I get over to my data review. Now, I did go ahead and you can look at every single well's production curve in this dashboard. And I decided to eliminate several wells that had odd production profiles. Those would be wells that were either constrained for some reason or maybe had a very significant frac hit early in their life, etc. So the way you do that here is reviewing these spark lines, selecting it, and then viewing it in the graph. I went ahead and did that, and that has reduced my well set down into 56 wells. Then I used the A4E tool here to auto forecast based on the parameters I set up. Again, the guys are going to tell you all about this in their session. So I had this AutoCast DCA for my now 56 set of wells. And then I can go here and look at some analytics on what those auto forecasted DCA curves look like. I can look at my spread of initial rates, my spread of initial declines, and my histograms of B factors for my set of wells. Now, the important thing I like to look at here is the tornado plot here at the bottom. So this chart is displaying every single header item that I have in the property table. That may or may not be relevant to productivity, but who knows? And then if it's on the left side, that means it's a negative correlative value. If it's on the right, it is correlative. In this case, the DCA was ran on non-normalized data to anything. So what I did was I told it to normalize based on lateral length. That is this value here that I've highlighted. So basically we can zoom in and see that there's various different parameters here that are really correlative. Some EURs that I loaded in from the data, the TTLs are total lateral length. Different factors here seem to be really influencing production. If I were spending a lot of time, I would really dig into that. Maybe I would reduce my sample set a little bit, but this to me is extremely powerful to see what the statistical model is suggesting is the most predictive or influential value to matching EUR. So then at that point, we can come over and look at our type well profile. And then this is where we can see every single well opposed to the averages. And I can also go ahead and select the entire 56 well set. And I can jump up here. You can see my heat map here on EUR. You can see all of the forecasts here. And then I can jump over here and expand the curve here, and we can see all the various parameters. We can see our average gas, we can see our median gas, and we can see a straight line fit. We can see all of the gas wells behind us. Also, we can do some cleanup here at this step and do an iterative process where it looks like some of my wells had 0 values for the first few months. So we can go in and clean that up, get everything shifted and normalized over. Once I finish that, I can actually directly export this data over into PHDwin. So I can select this entire data set here. And then you can see I'm selecting wells and it populates it over here into really nice, easy forecasts. Or easy tables for editing and importing into PHDwin. So I have my case list here, everything we need. I have my production list here, everything we need. And then the forecast, specially designed for V3 or V2. And we can port those directly over to PHDwin and start our economics review. All right. Now we are over here in PHDwin version 3. Before we get started, I wanted to mention a few things. First off, we have our PHDwin license and the SQL Management Studio set up in an Amazon Workspace remote desktop. So this works great for us. We have one license and my team and I can access this one at a time. And it's worked great for us to have it sitting in a remote desktop format for us because most of our team is remote. That being said, you might see Amazon Workspaces popping up here and there around my window. Next, Jonathan's mentioned this before. I myself am a Aries user until roughly 3 years ago when I was introduced to version 3. I have never used version 2, and I've also never taken a training course, either Aries, PHDwin, any of them. So I'm self-taught. Which can be fun for everyone because I may do things slightly differently as far as it goes when doing a workflow and using the tool itself. So this would be great. I would love to hear your comments on my workflow. Maybe because I do things a little bit differently, you will find something interesting about my workflow that is helpful to you. But my whole point of this part of my presentation is to take you completely through how I would evaluate a PDP asset and then do a type well on top of it. So let's jump right into it. As I just talked about, we use the Appalachian Basin Spotfire to select our well set. Then we push that data into the Blue River Analytics A4E dashboard. We use that primarily to filter down on production and to get our auto forecasts. At that point, I have a 55 well set, and I have taken the exports from A4E and loaded them in to my PHDwin project. So since this is start to finish, I am going to go ahead and show you how I did that. So I used the import tool here, and I navigated to my cases CSV that came right out of A4E, did my setup, and then have my mapping already designed here. I've got a lot of information I didn't necessarily pull over, but this is what we did. And I repeated the process for the production table and the forecast table. Now, the first thing I like to do when I get in a database is to make sure that things are set up as I think they should be. In this case, we're not going to do any complicated scenario work. I have my sort set up to operator because that's what I'm concerned with, and I don't have any filters. So I can see here I've got my 55 cases located in West Virginia. The next thing I like to do is make sure that I go over here and my effective date is set up appropriately. So based on the design of my question, I'm evaluating this well set with an effective date of January 2026. So that's set up here in my scenario settings. Next, I want to check a couple of wells to see what's going on. Let's put this back over here. Here we go. So let us make sure we got all the data we thought we did. So I've got my well names. I've got everything set up as a gas measure phase, and we're running a phase configuration of phase independent gas. All of the other items came in. We've got some ID codes that I use to map. We've got our monthly production table, which is what I would expect based on this being public data. And then all of our economic items are down here at the bottom, and we'll deal with those in a minute. So I went through and checked that all of this data came through for the majority of my wells. And now I want to move on to my forecasting step. Now, the question is, wait a second, we just did forecasting in A4E. Yes, I like auto forecasting tools to date as my starting point. So there's been other talks about we can't automate out an engineer. We still need engineers looking at things to avoid overestimating or underestimating reserves, even if we have parameter controls on our auto forecasts. I still believe that it's my job as an engineer, if I'm signing up on a project, I need to at least look at every single auto forecast. Now, you can do that in the A4E tool and you can modify those curves. I personally prefer to look through and make any adjustments to my curves in the actual software of record that I'm using for the reserves reporting. So in this case, PHDwin, here I would use the rate time. I would also use my cum versus rate, cum time, and some of the other flow regime evaluation methods that have been showcased previously in PHDwin Week. But I will mention that I did go through in preparation for my talk and I touched every single well and did some quick manual forecasting up here in the forecasting ribbon. This talk of mine is not meant to focus on the accuracy of forecasting, looking at flow regimes. I could still be picky about every single one of these forecasts. And in a real situation, I probably would do that. This case right here, it's a quick workflow and just getting us close. Again, I started off with those loaded in auto forecasts from A4E. One thing I know about this field and that you could notice as you were going, selecting through some wells here is that we could probably justify using an OGR rather than an independent phase for oil. But in our situation here, I'm going to go ahead and just use an independent phase for oil. We'll talk about that more when we're at the type well set. So just click through a couple of them here. We've got unique forecasts on all of them. And I would argue in this case that getting our QI right is probably the most important when pulling an auto forecast. That's usually where I'm the most picky, and because our B factors are pretty easily constrained in most auto forecasting methods and in A4E. Um, I also would like to mention that these fields produce NGLs that we're in. I mentioned that early on that West Virginia produces reports oil as a blend of NGLs and wellhead condensate, etc. In our case right here, we're going to assume that NGLs, the cost to produce is equal to the cost you receive in sales. So I'm not considering NGLs in my case at all. Also, these wells produce water. I did not pull in the water forecasts or the water volumes. Typically, we can estimate our water costs as $1 per MCF in Appalachia. There's a lot of water sharing that goes on for frac. We have readily available water for frac, but we also recycle almost 100%. So we've got a pretty good handle on our $1 per MCF cost of water. So I decided to skip that step. All right. So these are all of our forecasts. The next thing I like to do is that I like to see the total forecast of an area or my wells. So what I did here is I created a simple sum plot of all of my wells from Antero. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull over the Antero wells, and I'm going to forecast my volumes to EUR. I like that I can do this on the economic limit, etc. I like using EUR. I really like that I can do this for net or gross. This helps me compare visually to LOS statements, etc. if I have that. And I'm going to compile this. Even though it says unresolved proof, it was already loaded in here once. So we can see our report date. We can see where our forecasts start with the bumpy lines because of the calendar days. And we can see that roughly our decline in production is matching the decline in the forecast. That always gets me a little bit more comfortable with what's going on here with my forecast. I also have an all wells set that I had previously loaded. So this is all wells, heavily influenced by that Antero set because it's 31 of the 55 wells. And as you can see, I had also built previously total for EQT and expand. All right, now that I feel comfortable about my forecasting, again, to me, when I'm building a type well, the most important thing from my perspective is making sure that I pick a legitimate and a comprehensive analogy set, and then that my production's steady, and then that my forecasts are defendable for the PDPs. And then we can start doing the aggregation and can be concerned about all of the type well type items. So I approach my type well development as a first as a evaluation of the PDP. All right, so now for fun, we are going to do an economics workflow on the PDP. So let's go here to this first well. So I just like typically to go through my tabs and address each of those items. So what we're going to do here is we're first going to add in a price deck. Let's go over the models here before we jump strictly into that. So I have pre-built a couple of models here, and then we're going to use the global editor to push those into my individual wells. I have pulled a strip price for both gas and oil and loaded that in here. I have built a wet gas energy model. And at this point, we're not going to run any shrinkage. One thing I did not mention is that we're assuming that the volumes reported in the state database are paid volumes. That means that we're getting plant tailgate BTU. We should use plant tailgate BTU content, and that we don't have any shrinkage because they're the paid volumes. And then also in Appalachia, we have a pretty significant pricing differential to NYMEX on gas, and also a small differential to oil. However, as I mentioned, the oil reported in West Virginia is generally super light. So we're going to add a percent shrinkage here for the oil, and we're going to use 45% for this particular area. And we're going to set the hard date. We're going to set it at first production of the major phase. All right. So now we have all of our models. While I'm here, I'm also going to mention that we're going to include some expense models here in a second. And I have a 50 cents per MCF and a $5,000 per well fixed expense. All right, let's go over into the global editor and have some fun. So first off, again, I'm going to add my prices. So I'm going to add a gas price model, an oil price model, an energy factor, and we're going to add a shrinkage model. And we're going to add these in right here. And we also can't forget to add in our differentials. So we'll add those two in there. All right, so now we got to work on this. So we're going to apply, work down the list here on all of my price related items, and shrink. We're going to apply a price model to gas, price model to oil. Our energy factor is going to gas. Our differential is going to go to gas. The next differential is going to oil. And our shrink model is going on to oil. All right, we're going to add this as the price. It already knows price. We're going to add this as our add differential. It's already auto loading these in here, which is very nice. So if I had multiple options, they would find them there. And then we're going to be here with my shrinkage percentage, and it knows that is called new model still because I didn't rename it. So this is all of our pricing and shrinkage model, gas quality related items. I'm going to pull over my 55 cases here. I'm going to apply that in the global editor. And there we go. You can see our pricing in here. I've got my price for my gas and my differential, my BTU factor. Same with the oil with my differential. And we have our shrinkage here at 45%. Awesome. All right, on to the next tab. Let's go to expenses. We're going to repeat that. As I mentioned, I built in a variable cost of 50 cents and fixed of $5,000 per well per month. So we're going to go back to our global editor. I've got my wells loaded in there already. Notice that my attributes cleared because I already did the run. And I'm going to go here to my expenses tab, and I'm going to pull in expense models. I have 2 of them. I'm going to apply. The product is going to be gas and total wells. There's total wells. Stream is going to be op cost in this case, and well cost in this case. We're just going to call it an expense, and it already knows what I want to do there. All right, we're adding that in. We're almost done. Expenses. There we go. There's our 50 cents. There's our 5,000. We got taxes up next. I'm going to, again, use the global editor here, and I'm going to make sure that I have my fiscal model set up here to be West Virginia severance taxes. So we're going to apply a model. We're going to roll down to West Virginia. We're going to apply that. We should have our severance taxes loaded in now. It's all very quick. There's our 5% severance tax. Now, ownership, I'm going to approach a little bit differently. I'm going to do this as a build on a single well and then share that model to other wells. So one of the things I didn't mention at the beginning is that our particular case, we're pretending that we are non of interest. So we're going to say we have a 5% working interest, and the lease NRI in this region generally 80%. So I see my ownership's out of balance. All I got to do is hit this little calculator right here and gets rid of my error. I love that particular tool in PHDwin. And I'm going to save this case. Now I'm going to go over here to my global editor, and I'm going to go to my ownership options, and I'm going to do copy from existing. I'm going to apply my case input ID, which is going to be 856, to the rest of my wells. Got all my wells in there. Click apply. And now let's check another well. There we go. No matter which well I select, we've now got that ownership setting ready to go across the cases. Okay. The last piece here that we can't forget is investments. I'm going to do a similar thing. I need to add in P&A for all of my wells. And I'm going to assume that's $125,000. And I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to copy from existing. And this is case 856. I'm going to apply. Forgot to click save. There we go. Pushing across. And now you can see all of my cases here. If I just click through, they all have abandonment. Let's just do one more quick check on our eco options. Again, my economic start is January 1, 2026, which is the same as my effective date of the report. I am going to run my economic limit as maximum cumulative cash flow. And my kill date is not set at the moment. Typically, we run this to 50 years, and I typically like to hard code this in. And then I will once again go over here to my eco options, and I will change my kill date on all of my wells. So I did one as a specific, and now I can do all of the wells as a group. And apply that. And now we have economics set up here on our PDPs. All right. In the interest of time, I'm not going to show you my reporting or checking that I did of the PDP cases because I talk too much. So just assume that we ran that through our one line, we looked at the summaries, and then that is pushed into our SQL database, which we'll access later. Now I want to spend a little bit of time looking at building our type well parameters. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to build a non-economic group case, and we're going to do a normalized curve. As I talked about at the beginning, we have a wide range of lateral lengths here in Appalachia. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to name this my type well 1. And I'm going to switch here my major phase to gas, independent phase to gas. Select that. We're going to go here to our case settings. I'm going to gather my volumes until EUR. I'm going to normalize to peak production because I know this area. And during my production review, I saw that most of the wells were unconstrained and we didn't have a ramp month. In other states and other areas, it's very important to start at the first production. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to normalize our wells on lateral length. And now we're going to pull all 55 cases over into this set and compile them. What I like to do here is find my curve parameters and then build out my case wells. So we do have a compiled group here, and we've got a pretty solid band of results. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. We see our red curve here representing the average. And we've got some high side and low side producers here. And I really like here that in PHDwin, I can select a well in my well list and it highlights it over in the other side, or I can select this well and it shows me where it is in the list, and then I can remove that well if I'm uncomfortable with it drawing the average up. So let's just do that in this case and see what happens there. It adjusted. You may not have seen it. It was super quick. All right. Let's go ahead and add a gas curve here. So I'm just going to do a standard gas fit. And then I'm going to zoom back out for a second so that I've got a little bit of a better view. Zoom in. So generally here, I'm familiar with a 1.2 B factor. Typically fits all right. I prefer a 6% D-min. I'm going to set my QF at 300 MCF, sorry, 30 MCF. And I'm going to adjust my DI to be a little bit more aggressive. Oh, wow, I hit it right on the first try. Let's zoom in here a little bit and see about the fit. Wow, looks really good here for the first set of years. And then I'm probably a touch low. We do need to be careful here because I don't have well count turned on, and we might have some survivor bias of low side on economic wells. So I'm okay with the long term of the curve being a little bit lower than the average line being shown here. I do also know that we have some infill drilling that's going to happen. So I am much more comfortable with being on the low side for generational effects than I am being on the high side. That being said, we're going to save that case. I will then do a similar process for the Antero wells, the EQT wells, the expand wells. And then I like to compare all of those B factors, DEIs, QIs, etc., all based on the different well sets, just to make sure I'm in the safe zone. And then I would set my final curve parameters to do my comparison between Antero and EQT and whether or not I would recommend my company investing in future development as a working interest partner. I would also add in all of the other expenses and the CapEx investments, the pricing, everything we did for the PDP run, and compare those runs. But per usual, I've talked too long and I'm almost out of time. And I want to show you the A4E analytics on the backside that I use to evaluate my runs. So we're going to stop here for a moment in PHDwin and jump over into the A4E dashboard. All right, now we are ready to export our economics over into the A4E PHDwin reporting dashboard. So you'll see up here on my reports ribbon, I have it set to the Spotfire 2025 report. I have my cases selected. There are cases here for Antero and EQT, and I have it to preview. And once I click run, I get this handy report here saying that all of the data was pushed into my SQL database. Then I jump over here into the A4E dashboard and I click this refresh data from PHDwin, and it pulls all of that live economics data. Now, I love this because I have a lot of great graphics here that I can easily screenshot or export into presentations to show visually my economics runs, my KPIs, probit plots, etc. Now, as with the other A4E dashboard, the Blue River guys are going to be fully demoing this for you later today. So I'm just going to show you a couple of things that were important to me. I love seeing this cash flow waterfall here. It helps me understand where most of my net revenue is coming from and where my expenses are coming from. My clients have found this to be extremely helpful in understanding their fields. And then if I had some variety in my data, I could select different pieces of that to compare. I love this report summary page. You can basically create the one-line table here at the bottom, and you can sort and filter it by any value. In this case, I want to sort by basically my KPIs at the bottom. So we're going to include these last couple of ones here, and we're going to sort by ROI. The fun thing here is this graph at the top interacts with the graph at the bottom. So up here, I currently have it showing all revenue barred by operator, but now I'm going to change that to case name. So I can see all my different cases, and when I highlight them here, it highlights it at the bottom. I'm going to change this to net revenue over to my gross gas. Actually, let's go to our economic gas EUR. So it can be interesting to see if there's some variations in maybe wells that have EURs but are high EURs, but are maybe not your best ROI if you have some variation in your economics. I found this dashboard to be very helpful. Additionally, you can use this page to look at a bunch of different wells individually. And then one more, because we're running out of time, is the probit plot. If I were showing you not the PDP cases and showing you my comparative type wells, I would have one dot per type well, and I would do a lot of comparison between each of these type wells in order to make my recommendation. For this case, I thought it was more fun to show you all of the individual PDP wells. I can look at my net cash and color it by the operator. I have all kinds of options here to allow me to slice and dice my data. And I can look at the statistical spread on the data in the probit plots and just really have a good time looking at all of this variation. All right, as a summary of what we've done a full workflow through really exploring our data, selecting that ideal analogy set, and then running that through A4E to get our auto fits, then working in PHDwin and doing a full economic analysis on a PDP set, and then using that to inform the settings to fitting a type well and seeing the economics of that, and then pushing those results into the A4E PHDwin reporting dashboard. I want to thank you all for your time. My contact information is here. I look forward to your questions, your comments, constructive criticism, and let's continue the conversation. Thanks.